Greetings, Intro to Computing students. This is your Professor Jeff Dunker giving you a little bit of demonstration with the Python idle environment. What we're going to be doing today is making a demo application similar to what you're going to be doing in the lab for Sunday, and this includes defining variables within the Python environment, creating some statements to ask the user for input, and do some basic calculations. The one example I'm going to use this week is example exercise 2-7 in chapter 2 at the end of the chapter. The two assignments that you have for Sunday, besides the checkpoint exercises, the questions, two labs. One is a meal tax tip calculator and also an ingredient adjuster, so it calculates how much of a particular ingredient you need for a batch of something. And so let's go ahead and just make something of an application within the Python idle environment. So I'm going to start creating a new file by going under File, New File, and it opens up an area for me to start coding in. And what we're going to do with a miles per gallon calculator, we're going to have to store some variables ahead of time. So let's go ahead and make a couple variables that we can use to store particular items that we need. Like for miles per gallon, we'll need to have a variable called miles, and we're just going to set it to 0.0. In my example today, we're using floating point variables. What this means is they're decimal based. Any number that isn't a whole number, 1.2, 20,000.579, just anything like that is a floating point. So we're going to be using floating point variables today, and we're going to go and create another variable for miles per gallon. We're going to want to store something for gallons, and we're just going to initialize all these to 0 for now. And then we're going to make a variable called MPG for where we're going to store that miles per gallon calculation, and we're going to be setting that, initializing that to 0 as well. Now, in Python, you learned that you can make comments that are ignored by the interpreter that are good for you to review, and for any programmer that's looking at your code to look at. I'm just going to say, declared variables section. You can do whatever you like. I'm not as concerned about significant comments in your code for labs, but it's a good practice to get into. Definitely for your projects, those few assigned projects that we do for the semester, they're larger. You definitely want to use a solid convention for commenting. And you can read through the specifications that we want for the projects under course resources. Anyways, let's go back. I'll go back to my code here, and we have our variables defined. And now we're going to need to, when we're making a miles per gallon calculator, we're going to have to ask the user for some input, right? So what we're going to do, I'm going to make a little comment saying get the miles driven, and underneath that I'm going to ask the user for some input, and I'm going to store it within the variable miles equals, and then we're going to try to get make sure it's a float variable. We're going to ask for the input, and our input is going to ask enter the miles driven, and that's the proper syntax. And the correct amount of parentheses. We need a parenthesis before the input because we're typecasting it as float, as we call it. Your input statement, and then the input needs parentheses as well, and quotes. What you're going to be asking the user inside the quotes. So you noticed I made a little bit of space at the end, so it's a little bit more clean looking to the user. So there's a little bit of space after the input, so they can actually type in a number. So that's one command, or one part of the code that we're going to be doing. And the next part, we're going to get the gallons, the amount of gallons used for fuel. Get the gallons of fuel used. So that's our comment for that line. I'm going to put the data after it gets input from the user into that variable called gallons. And it's going to be a float type, and we're going to get the input again from the user. This time we're going to ask, enter the gallons of fuel used. So then I quote, double parenthesis at the end because I have to have matching parentheses. And it shows up nicely there. Then we want to do our calculation. Since we both have the miles and the gallons, now we can do our miles per gallon calculation. So make a calculation comment, calculate the miles per gallon, and then our miles per gallon is going to be calculated at miles divided by gallons. So miles divided by gallons calculation gets put into the variable MPG, and then we need to tell the user what the calculation came out as. So we're going to print the result, and that's going to be our comment for this, and I'm going to just say print you used, oops, dismiss, sorry, got email stuff coming in. You used, quote, comma, because we're going to be adding stuff to this print line besides the text we just put in those quotes. And we want it specially formatted because the decimals, you'll notice, I'll show you without the format and with the format. So format, we're going to format the result MPG, and we're going to format it .2f. And what that means is it's going to have two decimal points after the decimal, and it's floating point. So it's going to be a decimal that's shown to you, but it's just going to have two spots instead of what you'll see if we don't use that command. So you used, then we're going to add extra text after the number, miles per gallon. And then we need another matching parenthesis because we need same amount of open parentheses as closed parentheses. So let's just try running that at first. And you go to run module, and we've noticed you have to save the file first. And this is why you're gonna save it, or wherever you want to save it. And I'm just gonna name it. See, defaults Python files, so it'll be a .py extension. So I'm going to name it test or program 2-7. So that's what it was. And now we can run it. And that runs the program, and now it's asking the user for the number of miles driven. And I'm going to say, let's say we had 320 miles in our car, and how much gallons did we use? We used 10 gallons. There, you used 32.00 miles per gallon. So that's how it worked. But now, let's go open that file up, relook at it, and now let's try doing print the result raw. What I mean just by raw is let's not do anything fancy in formatting for it. You used, I'm just going to call it print raw dash you used, and then we'll say MPG without that format statement, and then comma, and then quotes miles per gallon, so it prints on the same line. So what do you think is going to happen here? You're going to get the inputs. It's going to print it the nice way first, and then it's going to print it the raw way. So let's give that a shot. We'll go to run module, source okay to save, yes, and just overrode what I just made. So now we enter the miles driven, 320, enter the gallons, fuel, 10, and see how now instead of 00, It printed out 32.0. Let's put in some really weird numbers just to see how this may look otherwise. So we'll say file open, your program 2.7, run it. And our mouse driven, let's say something really odd, 280, 789, 279. And the amount of gallons used, let's say 9.9333. See how you can get really long, elongated decimals beyond the decimal point? So to avoid that, that's why you'd use your format, to make a clean output. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of idea how to make a program in Python and how to get it to run. And let me know if you have any questions. Have a good day.